I lived in Orlando, Florida for over 15 years, and I always find myself still learning about different parts of Orlando that I just didn't know about. And it's led me to really one conclusion, that Orlando is fairly big. And I can only imagine what it would be like for someone coming from outside that hasn't spent too much time in Orlando, really trying to figure out what would be a good place to live. So I decided to put this video together where I go over 5 tips to help you really start honing down on what would be a great place that would fit you, your lifestyle, your family, and what your goals are. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive into tip number 1, taking a look at location. So when it comes to real estate, of course, it's all about location. And one of the things I always try to talk to everyone who's relocating to the area is try to figure out what are the things that are important to you. For example, at least for me, I was just moving across town in that time where I bought my second home, and we were trying to figure out exactly what would be a good fit for our lifestyle. And at the time, for us, what was big was really going to the gym and going to Disney, which really made things a little bit complicated just because we were looking to buy a bigger home. So we really wanted to see our money go further, and we found ourselves frequently in St. Cloud, and we looked at areas in Kissimmee, and we were also looking at Lake Nona because, well, it was growing a lot and it was very popular and still is. But because we wanted to still be close to family, it made it a little bit difficult for us to be able to nail exactly where we wanted to live and what community would make sense for us. So for us, we found ourselves just simply sitting down, making a list, weighing the pros and cons to try to figure out what exactly were the most important things to us and what other things we could sacrifice. For example, for you, it might be just simply living close to work. So obviously that's gonna vary depending on where you're gonna work here in Orlando. But if you wanna live near the airport, then odds are you probably would wanna live somewhere like Lake Nona. And then for those of you who would prefer living somewhere like downtown, obviously College Park, Baldwin Park would be the better areas to focus in on. And for some people, obviously they're excited to move here because of the parks, Disney, all the entertainment and attractions. So odds are you probably will want somewhere like Horizon West. Celebration is also another great option. But like I mentioned before, there's gonna be a lot of things vying for your attention. So what I would really recommend, and you can make it a whole activity of this, especially if you have kids, just pull out some sticky notes, start writing down all the things that are important for you, your kids, your family, what are the things that you wanna prioritize, and just stick them on the wall and start placing them in order from most important to least important. That way, whenever it comes time to get rid of one of those sticky notes, you can just pull it off the wall and say, well, we're gonna have to sacrifice this one thing in favor of all the others that we're trying to get. For example, many people who live in Lake Nona wish there was a Target here, right in Lake Nona. But unfortunately, according to Target and their website, they're not bringing a Target to Lake Nona anytime in the near future, which really isn't the end of the world because at the end of the day, technically Lake Nona is kind of sandwiched between 2 Targets, each about 20 minutes away, which, I'll be honest, it's just not the end of the world. 20-minute drive is not so bad. Another important thing to do is really connect with someone who knows the area very well. So definitely please feel free to give me a call, shoot me a text, send me an email. I'd love to learn all about what's got you moving here to the Orlando area, and maybe even go over some of those things that are important for you and your family, and maybe figure out what areas will cover most of them, so that way you can move here and definitely feel like you made the right choice as far as communities go. Now, of course, reaching out is not for everybody, so I get that. If you'd like, you can also download my free relocation guide. It's down below in the comment section. You can go ahead and enter your email, your phone number, and I'll take that as a sign that you want me to give you a call to help you with this move. Now, with that said, let's go ahead and dive into tip number 2, researching schools. So of course, if you have kids, one thing that is going to be on your mind is, how do we find a good school? But before we get to that, I really want to dive into the fact that even if you don't have kids, don't plan on having kids, or are past that phase in your life, I do think you should still research the schools, because often more than not, property values are fairly closely tied to how well schools do and how popular they are. The more popular a school is, the more expensive that neighborhood will be, and that's just a given fact, right? Because at the end of the day, it's basic economics. That area is going to be in higher demand than the area where the school might not be as highly rated. Now, as far as schools go, at the end of the day, I definitely have to tell you that Orlando has a lot of great schools. I have an education background, and I really do feel like that almost every school here does have a lot to offer. It'll come down to maybe the culture, expectation, and really just the individual themselves when it comes to schools. Now, of course, it still goes without saying that, at least for me, I know I still want the absolute best for my kids. So I'm gonna research and make sure that I'm sending them to some of the best schools, and I feel comfortable sending them there. And if that's you, I do definitely have an entire video that walks you through the entire process. I would highly recommend checking that out. I'll link that down in the description below. But at the end of the day, when it comes to popular areas, because of the schools, places to look at would include places like Lake Nona, Winter Park, Winter Garden, Windermere. You also have your Avalon Park, you have your even Waterford Lakes, I would say would be an area that's still fairly popular because of the schools. So that's just a couple to name off the top of my head. Definitely, you know, if you have questions on that, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than glad to answer them. Now, of course, you know, at the end of the day, I still would recommend doing a little bit of research about the schools. You know, for example, one thing I would say to do is do something like go to greatschools.org, where it can give you at least some kind of barometer for how they perform, and then start looking at the neighborhoods around them. Because the reality is that you're going to notice a trend on the fact that, you know, the more popular a school is, or the better it performs on this website in particular, you'll see that the homes will be a bit more expensive than other areas around it. Now, tip number 3 includes lifestyle. Something that I would really recommend doing is looking into the lifestyle in the community, which doesn't have as much to do with, you know, what's around the area or the amenities, which I'll get to towards the end of the video, but it has a lot more to do with you yourself. What are some things that you enjoy doing? Are you an outdoorsy person? Like you like going canoeing, hiking, camping, going out on runs? You're more athletic, so is that something that you prefer doing in your life? Or are you someone who likes maybe a little bit more upscale living? What are the things that you really do enjoy doing? Because at the end of the day, those are the things that will help you figure out what area has people that like the same stuff that you do. Because at the end of the day, if you can answer those questions, it'll help you find a community that really does fit your lifestyle a little bit better. For example, if you want something active, vibrant, loud, then maybe downtown Orlando might be a good place for you. I know I had a client not too long ago. He was a young professional. He bought a condo downtown, which for me, you know, obviously not a good fit for me. I cannot see why anyone would want to buy a condo, but he was a young guy. He wanted to be in the music scene, close to downtown Orlando, play at the local bars. It didn't make sense for him to buy a home in the suburbs. So for him, it was buying a condo downtown. It fit his lifestyle perfectly. Or maybe you want something a little bit more upscale, a little bit more luxurious as far as the shopping, dining go, maybe something with a little bit of an art scene. Then in that case, I would say definitely Winter Park might work out a lot better for you. Or again, going back to health and wellness, I definitely enjoy health and wellness. That's something that's a lot more important for me. So, I mean, I think a couple of places that could work out very well, again, going back to Lake Nona, right? They have all of medical sitting there, and also would work out really well too if you are a frequent traveler, because it's about 10 minutes away from the airport. Another great spot if you're into like outdoors and hiking would be Sunbridge. I also think Claremont would also be another great option. And that's just to name a few, because again, we're trying to focus in on lifestyle. You know, what are the things that you enjoy doing the most? Because again, at the end of the day, that could really help you start the process to really begin finding places that make a lot of sense for you. Now, tip number 4 has everything to do with HOA rules. Now, I will talk a little bit more about HOAs when I go into amenities next, but I really want to talk a little bit about the rules because it can impact your decision. And here's how. Well, if you are planning on buying a home here in Orlando, maybe to live in for 1 or 2 or 3 years and then rent it out later, especially if you were thinking about maybe turning it into an Airbnb, right? Because many people who are moving here to Orlando, that's one of the things they think about. They think that it's a big touristy area, so you can just have an Airbnb, or you can turn your home that you buy into an Airbnb. At the end of the day, there are a ton of rules, and with a lot of the HOAs around here, and they're very strict about them. I mean, there are communities that do allow short-term rentals and Airbnbs, but I mean, most of them really, they prefer like 7 to 12 month rentals. So that's something to consider, because if that was part of your plan as far as buying here in Orlando, then you might want to reconsider your strategy just a little bit, because again, HOAs, they can be very strict as far as rentals go. Now, of course, we do have communities without HOAs, which can be fairly great to live in, especially if you wanted to add modifications to your home, or maybe you wanted to tear it down completely and build something custom, or you just simply are against those cookie cutter neighborhoods, which a lot of neighborhoods with HOAs, they're fairly cookie cutter, which at least for me, that doesn't bother me at all. But for a lot of people, I mean, they want some things that have a lot more character. For that, you probably want to go with, you know, some older neighborhoods or neighborhoods without HOAs. Some communities do have restrictions on what kind of pets you can even have. For example, like with pit bulls, you know, a lot of HOAs around here, they don't allow them. I had a client not too long ago who had a pit bull and was looking to buy in a neighborhood with an HOA, but unfortunately they did not allow that particular kind of pet breed in that neighborhood for whatever reason. She actually ended up buying in a neighborhood without an HOA. She's happy now, but again, it's one of those things that you really have to be careful and watch out for, because the last thing you want to do is close on a home and find out that one of your beloved pets can't live there with you. Now, tip number 5 is researching the amenities in a particular neighborhood. Now, I'll tell you what, this might be a little bit of a controversial statement, but I think you should not buy in a community with a pool unless you are happy paying for the HOA there. I'll tell you what, a lot of communities here in Orlando, the HOAs, they're fairly reasonable. Older communities, I think they could be as low as $100, $200 per year, but a lot of them, it's gonna end up being about $100 or $200 a month, and especially depending on what kind of amenities it has. I'll tell you what, in my neighborhood, we have a pool, and it's not the reason I moved here, but again, it's one of those things that, because it's been damage done to the pool, there've been issues and break-ins, and they had to add security. One, it's shut down every once in a while, which is very frustrating, so I don't get to use it that often at all already. But along with that, our HOA actually went up because of it. It had a little bit more to do with the insurance, but you can't help not ignore the fact that, there's a lot of things going on that must have some kind of cost. So really, really consider, what things you would actually get a lot of use out of, because there are a ton of communities with amazing amenities. There are communities with not just one resort style pool, but 3 or 4 of them. There are neighborhoods with gyms, clubhouses, all that great stuff that, is amazing to have in a neighborhood. But again, it's always gonna come at a cost, and you have to really think to yourself, is this something that really is for me, something that I'd actually get a lot of use out of? If yes, then you probably would love some of these master plan communities, some of which, they're putting retail and schools almost right in the neighborhood. So everything can be almost walking distance away, which I think is pretty great to have things that close. But if you don't think that's for you, then there are plenty of neighborhoods that really are very basic, very minimal, and you'll see it reflected in the cost of that HOA. And of course, to be able to learn a little bit about some of these communities with these amazing amenities, I would really recommend that you check out this playlist here, where I cover some of the top areas to live here in Orlando.